Trump probably, on some level, despite the fact that he's a narcissist and a psychopath and all these other things, at some level has the worst case of imposter syndrome in history.
Imposter syndrome president.
Yeah. And he knows he doesn't belong there. This guy, he's got imposter syndrome, and I also think he hears the Grim Reaper. I mean, he's hearing the footsteps of the Grim Reaper in the background, and he wants to memorialize himself everywhere he looks.
David Rothkopf.
I'm
in
here.
person.
In
Is it a
flesh.
mirage?
No, it's amazing.
I think it might be a mirage.
Do you think I look better in person?
It's true. You are a real person.
Yeah.
You look magnificent, David.
Thank you.
As does your T-shirt. Be Beast.
Be Beast.
So good.
Yeah.
Be Beast.
I had to
Be
make these
Beast.
myself. You guys need more merch.
I know we do need more merch. You're right.
I mean, think of it. Write in if you're watching this podcast
Well,
and you
what
want
merch would people like? Do you
Yeah.
think they'd like hats, T-shirts, bags,
T-shirts with your
tattoos?
yeah.
We could do tattoos. No, not stick-on, permanent. Permanent. A
Oh.
bit like Graham Plattner's tattoo. Joke. Obviously a joke.
Which one? You mean the SS?
Well, who knows? I don't want to. I never want to see Graham Plattner's. I feel like I was a bit
He's
taken
over.
in by Graham
You
Plattner.
were. You
I
were
know.
a little suckered by him.
A little sad about that.
Well,
Partly
he's
because when I
gone.
talked to him, he was doing IVF in Norway, and I thought that was felt like a modern man thing to do. But turns out he's not a very modern man.
You mean all the sex abuse?
I mean the allegations of rape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's-
Anyway, he's gone. He's gone.
we're
The
we're against that.
Democrats have got other issues now. Before we get into it, a reminder, we are independent media, so we need your support. Please subscribe to The Daily Beast. We have all sorts of tiers of membership. You can be a Beast member, you can be a friend of the Beast, but please subscribe. And of course, we now have a new phone line where you can leave us messages, which we are going to start playing. Our number is 929-274-3577. 929-274-3577. So you can leave your messages for us there. Leave special messages for David Rothkopf, for Michael Wolff, for me, for Kurt Anderson, for anybody you like, any of our regular guests, Jen Welch. And we will look forward to playing some of them on the Daily Beast podcast. Today we're going to talk about Trump melting down. We're going to talk about Putin melting down. We're going to talk about possibly Netanyahu melting down here tomorrow. Well, not literally here, but in DC tomorrow. We're going to talk about the Pentagon fudging the numbers of American casualties, which is a much more serious story than I feel like we should all be talking about this all the time, and we're not. It's
insane.
way down in the headlines.
It's insane.
It's a
totally
terrible fudge going on by the Pentagon. So that's just for starters. David, where do we begin? White House Correspondents' disaster that Trump has spent all weekend backstroking away from.
Yeah, it was a disaster on every level, right? Let's start with the people who actually hosted it. Like, why did they do that? Should we have done this over again?
To celebrate the First Amendment. We know that.
Celebrate the First Amendment?
Well,
with Donald Trump?
Right, but there was
the
a moment...
biggest enemy of the First Amendment there ever was?
Well, is he, or doesn't he just provoke the media because all they do is cover him, all we do is cover him, and he loves that. He lives in the attention bubble.
There's a dichotomy there, but he also has his guy at the FCC intimidating people, trying to shut things down. He's suing people. He's cutting all these deals. He's got the Ellisons buying CBS, trying to buy CNN. He's trying to do a lot of stuff. At the Defense Department, you can't actually get into the Defense Department anymore. He's cut. If you're a good reporter, they don't let you into White House briefings anymore.
And yet the White House is leaking. Regime change is packed full of all sorts of juicy gossip. We talk about this government more than ever.
Well, we do because there has never been a circus like the circus that we're watching, right? And, every day there's some insane story. And that, look at the weekend. Trump goes to the White House Correspondents' Dinner. He's not funny.
He's definitely not funny.
The Mentalist, not so funny.
I didn't even watch The Mentalist.
No, it was good. He did a little shtick with Todd
Didn't stick. Well, what was that?
It was
For
like,
those
how
of us
much
who
money
didn't
do you
stay
have in
on?
your wallet, Todd? I'm going to guess. How could I possibly know? $85. That was the entertainment. But then Trump comes on. He gives an hour-long speech. None of it is funny. He's insulting people. He's just being mean. And I think he goes home and he goes, everything I'm doing is failing. The war is failing. The way I used to get laughs. People used to think I was funny. They used to think I was attractive.
Do you think the writer of the speech has been fired yet? Because he kept saying when he delivered his jokes and they bombed and the room was kind of just staring at him like, this is embarrassing. And then he would go, who wrote this line? Who wrote this line? And I was like, whoever wrote the line, you're going to be fired.
I don't know, but they may be fired. But then I think he immediately changed gears. It was like, well, how do I change the subject? Well, how do I distract people from this? And so on Sunday, what do you get? What was it, 47?
Oh, well, let's go through them, shall we? I was hoping that we would get to this. This is Trump's Truth Social. He did 643 posts, I think, for most of the month. And then here we go. He did 43 posts yesterday.
40.
This is the president of the United States. And he's trying to charge for some of them, right? That he says will be market-moving information.
Well, yeah, no, he's charging. Truth Social is a huge, gigantic failure, right?
Yeah.
But now he's like, if you pay me $100,000 and I do something that's going to move the market, I'll tell you first so you can invest and be an insider trader just like everybody in the White House.
Okay, so what have we got? What is this? This is Trump lending a hand to George Washington.
Saving George Washington.
Saving George
he's
Washington
like
from
at Mount
what?
Rushmore, apparently, and he's on a cliff, and he's reaching out and pulling up George Washington, which I think means saving America, but also showing Trump is a powerful, virile man with some mountaineering skills.
With some, and is this a reference to the Save America Act?
Could well be. I think he thinks about that a lot,
right?
Because he has been tweeting about it a lot. But it's pretty ridiculous.
It's also a time travel epic, and it's got the same logo as Time magazine. Remember Time magazine?
Yeah, magazine. I don't remember a magazine.
Right.
I'm a generation after that.
Oh, you are? Right.
Yeah,
You're kind of millennial.
I'm very
right.
Z.
You're Gen
Zoomer.
Z.
I'm a Zoomer.
You're a Zoomer.
But it's made to look like a movie poster. I think that's the whole idea, is that this is some time travel epic where Trump goes back in time and saves George Washington possibly from creating the Constitution, all these rules he hates.
Of course. All right. What about this? Now, this is Trump as a doctor. We know that Trump fantasizes about wearing a white coat and a stethoscope and presenting as a doctor.
But this time he doesn't have the halo that he often has when he's a doctor.
Correct.
In these things. But he is saying to everybody, look, Republicans need a spine. Now, the reality is the entire Republican Party has had its spine surgically removed so that they can sort of goop around on the floor at the feet of Trump. But what he wants here is for them to stand up and pass the Save America Act. And also, I think he wants them to get rid of the filibuster, according to one of his True Social tweets this morning. And he thinks this will solve all of their problems because he's terrified. I mean, this is really the core thing. Donald Trump is terrified of what's going to happen in 99 days.
In 99 days.
99 days, because not only could he lose, not only could there be investigations, impeachment hearings, his agenda will never go forward again. Not only could all those things happen, but all of a sudden he will be indisputably a lame duck. He'll be on his way out. He will be in the departure lounge. And for him, at 80, the departure lounge doesn't go to your next great job. The departure lounge goes to a nice, toasty warm room somewhere down in the nether regions next to Mitch McConnell's room and next to
Lindsey
Graham's room with flames licking in. And,
Do you think he Do you think there will be major investigations into Donald Trump? I mean, the Democrats need 3 House seats and they need 4 Senate seats. Unclear if they get the Senate. But if they get the House, do they start investigations?
Inevitably. And now there's some Democrats who are like, oh, don't do that. It's a distraction. And it's like, distraction from what? This is the most corrupt government ever. People hate the corruption. But I think what a lot of these Democrats don't realize is, that the knee bone is connected to the shin bone, that the corruption is connected to oligarchs controlling everything, is connected to the fact that the system is rigged, is connected to the fact that the government serves rich people and not poor people, is connected to the fact that you don't have health care, or he's shutting down your hospital, or, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all these pieces get together. Smart politicians today get it. John Ossoff, running for Senate in Georgia, has coined this phrase, or has been one of the people to popularize the idea of the Epstein class. Mm-hmm. And it's perfect because it says Epstein, corruption, oligarchs, the system is rigged against you, and he gets this moment, which is, first of all, it's what people feel. But secondly, it's kind of a cousin of what Trump did when he ran, which was the system doesn't work. You need somebody from outside the system. I'll shake things up. He's had 2 terms. He has screwed everything up. And now people want to shake him up, turnabout is fair play.
So do you think he was really melting down? I mean, let's keep going through what about this? Where is John Thune? So interestingly, he's really going after the Republicans in here, right? Partly because he wants to get his SAVE Act through, which clearly isn't going to get passed. And now he's going on to John Thune, leader of the Senate.
Yeah, well, he thinks that these tactics work. And I think he's missing a point. Last week there were these Arizona primaries, and some of his candidates who were complete loons from outer space won their nominations, right? And he's then the next day is like, see, Trump is in charge. And it's like, dude, this is an Arizona primary. A fraction of the people vote. They're all people who believe in, space aliens and that people didn't land on the moon and all this other kind of nutty stuff. And they're responsive to him. But what Thune knows is that we're 99 days away from the general election.
Right.
And in the general election, you don't just have Republican crazies voting. And so Thune, look, he's had his spine surgically removed too. He's no great character. But Thune is trying to say, well, how do I keep my majority in the Senate? And that's what he cares about. And he's being quite pragmatic. Trump doesn't care about that stuff. Trump cares about how do I protect Trump?
Mm-hmm. So what does this one mean? Where is John Thune? Recess appointments. What does this refer to? What are recess appointments?
Well, recess appointments are appointments that you make when you can't get your people confirmed. And so the president has the authority to make a recess appointment. I don't really get this because Trump has been appointing people left and right. When, if Todd Blanche doesn't get appointed this week, or doesn't get confirmed this week, or he doesn't get confirmed, Trump will just say, okay, I'm going to leave him on as a recess appointment, or I'm going to, and he'll do that, and he's got a lot of people in there. Trump's signature move has been to appoint acting heads of different departments.
Right. So we've got acting head Bill Pulte in intelligence at the moment.
Yes.
Right. So we're waiting also for Jay Clayton, who in theory should be replacing
Who will probably,
him.
But Jay Clayton is one of these guys who's like an establishment New York lawyer. And so they're Democrats who are like, oh, yes, I know Jay Clayton. Jay Clayton's a good man. Jay Clayton's not a good man. How could he be a good man? When John Ossoff said, who won the 2020 election? He goes, I'm not playing these games.
Yeah.
And you're like, dude, answer the question. Like, who won the election? No, I'm not going to.
And another New York prosecutor, Democrat, Todd Blanche.
Well, yeah, because these people come out of the Southern District and people think, therefore, they have some credibility because that's like, it's kind of the Rolls Royce of the DOJ. They're independent. They're high quality. They're dealing with these big cases. But then these guys end up being complete, total sellouts. And they just want to get ahead and they'll do whatever Trump says. And, Clayton, this should be disqualified. I mean, let's go back a step. The director of national intelligence job actually has a requirement that you have to know something about intelligence. Clayton doesn't know anything about intelligence. He has no background in intelligence. He's better than Pulte, whose background is at Bed Bath and Beyond or something like that, right? But Clayton doesn't have the right background for the job. And then when he goes in front of the Senate and says, "No, I'm not answering your question. I'm not going to tell you who won the election because I am totally at the beck and call of the president, and I'm another blind loyalist."
Mm-hmm.
And that's not who you want running your intelligence community, because you want the intelligence community to come and say, "Mr. President, if you attack Iran, they will take over the Persian Gulf, and they will not respond to your bombing, and they will start attacking elsewhere." And the president to say, "Oh, well, these are independent perspectives. Perhaps I should listen to these." Now, again, the bridge too far because Trump doesn't listen to anybody, but that's what you would like. And he's already saying, "I'm not going to be credible. I'm going to get you the intel you want," which is what Pulte does.
Right.
He wants some intel that says the elections are faked and foreigners were involved. I'll get it to you. I'll just black out all these sections of the page that have the actual facts on them. And we can wave those in front of the audience.
All right. So we've been through Truth Social, so you don't have to. Let's keep going because it is madness what was going on there yesterday. Madness. What did you think of this one?
This is really classic Trump. Trump likes walls.
Yep.
He doesn't like Canada.
Yep.
And he thinks Canada is putting, smoke into the country because of all the forest fires that come from them not sweeping the floors of the forest or whatever. So this is a thing showing a big air filter on the Canadian border.
Which I wish we could put one up because actually the smoke from the fires was quite bad in New York over the last couple of weeks.
No, it's been a little bit of a thing, but of course the reason for the fires is climate change, which Trump doesn't believe in.
Right.
And so we're not actually getting to the core issue. This is kind of silly. He hates Canada, though. And it's kind of weird. Who hates Canadians?
Well, Trump does because he hates people who are fairly normal, effective, get on with things, and don't make a fuss.
Well, in Canada, right. And, for years, Americans...
And I'm sure he hates Mark Carney, right?
Oh, yeah. And he probably doesn't like Justin Trudeau. In retrospect, who's going out with Katy Perry. That probably bugs him a lot, too. Well,
and Katy Perry complaining that Trump was using her song without any attribution or it wasn't supposed to be using it at all. Stole her song.
It's unbelievable, particularly after that nice ride she had in Jeff Bezos' rocket,
Yes, indeed.
So she was in one camp. She switched over. But, Canada, America used to think of as kind of a little brother and so forth. Canada works. They have a functioning healthcare system. They have a functioning government. They're independent. They do, they do not have the lunacy that's going on here, and they have opposed things like Greenland going to the United States and so forth. And so it bugs him. It bugs him. He thinks he should be able to bully everybody.
Well, and I think he thinks he should be able to take over Canada, doesn't he? Because it's right there for the pickings.
Well, no, and he thinks it should be a 51st state. Sometimes he doesn't think this through, though. If we took over Canada, you think they're voting Republican?
Well, maybe we should take over them. We should. All right.
Same with Venezuela, by the way. They're not, going to vote for Trump.
Okay, let's have a look at this. Other presidents, Trump, Vietnam War, Korean War, Iraq, Afghanistan, Iran, Venezuela. He has a point here.
Does he? Does he really have a point? Okay, first of all, his Iran military conflict, it's not a war.
Right.
Because he doesn't want to think about it as a war. Secondly, is his point that we haven't hit 50,000 dead? Thirdly, if you look down at this, 4 months, 18 dead. What has happened over the weekend? What should be the biggest scandal in America right now, right? Mm-hmm. The Defense Department has been lying about the casualties from this conflict with Iran, right? And they removed 4 people from that list of 18 dead for a while because they said, well, it was during the ceasefire, so it doesn't really count as people, during the war.
Right. And aren't they calling it overseas operations casualties?
Some kind of, bookkeeping bullshit. But more importantly, we've now discovered that there have been 600 casualties, which they've minimized. Now, as it happens, if you take the first couple of years of the Afghan war, they did not reach that level of casualties that we've reached in 4 months in this war. So actually, if you do the math, in terms of the casualty count, I think it was 4 years before they hit the number of casualties that we've hit in 4 months in this war. So it's a lot. Like all of these other things, it's a misleading lie. And, it's absurd because Trump said this is going to be over overnight. It's not really a war. We're not going to have any costs. It also neglects the fact that Vietnam, Korea, Iraq, Afghanistan did not blow up the global economy, did not push up prices for everybody else, did not create the biggest energy crisis the world has ever seen. And so, wars have different kinds of costs. And this one has had gigantic costs that don't show up in this tabulation here.
Okay, it's also 5 months since he went in, 28th of February, I think.
It's 5 months tomorrow.
Right, 5 months tomorrow. Okay. First Amendment, that's him at the White House Correspondents putting on his 2028 hat.
It's a great joke,
right?
That he's going to run again.
Great joke, great joke.
He's not going to make it to the end of this term. If Trump remains in charge, we should have a little bit of a bet. One of those croissants you give Michael Wolff, you could, I'll bet you one of those.
No, we should bet on Casualty. Oh, you said you can't bet on people's lives in Casualty, though you may have seen Kurt Anderson yesterday, the novelist, talking about imagining Trump's death.
Which he started writing before Trump was reelected.
Correct.
And Trump dies in that book, and this is going to disappoint a lot of your listeners, at age 89.
Yeah, so another 9 years to go, people.
And he's still in office, by the way. In 2035, he's still in office in that book. But the point is, he's not going to make it to the end of this term. If there are not days or weeks or months with J.D. Vance as the acting president, I would be hugely surprised.
So you think he won't live out his term?
Well, he may live it out, but we could have a little bit of Mitch action. He disappears. We don't see him for a while. Who knows what's going on?
Now, how many days? So it's 99 days to the midterms, and I think we now have a ticker on the Daily Beast counting the days since anyone last saw Mitch McConnell speaking.
43. I think I saw your ticker this morning. I think it's great.
Yeah, it goes by the second, so it's worth checking in on.
No, you could have a countdown clock to the election.
Yes,
you
it's a countdown clock for Mitch to come out and send us a video. Yeah. All right, let's keep going.
Yeah,
okay,
notice, by the way, I think one of the interesting things here is, by the way, Trump's got all these things. Does he mention Mitch ever?
He doesn't mention him at all, right? I think he very, very briefly mentioned him and said he never liked the guy. So what about this picture? So what is he doing by making pictures of himself with previous presidents? He obviously doesn't feel worthy of being in their company, so he's sort of over-projecting, was my take on it. What's yours?
No, I think, Dr. Coles, you're exactly right. I think it is projection. I think, he feels extremely insecure. I mean, Trump probably, on some level, despite the fact that he's a narcissist and a psychopath and all these other things, at some level has the worst case of imposter syndrome in history. Mm-hmm. He knows he doesn't belong
Imposter syndrome president.
Yeah. And he knows he doesn't belong there. And so he's like, well, look, I have the same job George Washington had. I have the same job John F. Kennedy had. I could be surrounded by all of these people. Of course, any of them would have dragged him out of the office kicking and screaming, right? None of them would have tolerated somebody like this trying to seize the office. And there's a particular irony here because, of course, what was the memorial that the Congress came up with for John F. Kennedy? The Kennedy Center. Mm-hmm. And now we're learning, there are more stories coming out even today of how he's gutted it, hollowed it out. And then court's trying to, say, no, you can't do that. You got to turn it back on. But it is an empty disaster. There's still tarps over the front of it because Trump can't bear to see the front of it without his name on it now. And there was a talk this weekend, by the way. There's some move afoot where he wants to rename Penn Station in New York.
Oh, yes. Well,
Trump.
that was, I think, wasn't that part of the deal to release funding for the tunnel?
It was, but now there's some people pushing for it and trying to make it law, because Amtrak or something. I don't know. It's some crazy thing. But, this guy he's got imposter syndrome. And I also think he hears the Grim Reaper. He's hearing the footsteps of the Grim Reaper in the background, and he wants to memorialize himself everywhere he looks.
So he is now pursued by a war that he started that he can't seem to get out of. Another person, I think, hearing the Grim Reaper, also started a war he can't get out of, Vladimir Putin. We had an excellent report by Alison Quinn, who spent a lot of time in Russia and Ukraine over the weekend talking about how Putin has basically been hiding in a bunker for the last year or so. The war is getting worse. Russian casualties are terrible. It's sort of having a ripple effect in Russia. He's been out and about, and people don't like him and they don't like what he sees, and he keeps being ambushed by people.
I think these guys are sort of children of the Cold War, right? Putin was a KGB officer stationed in East Germany during the Cold War. He was actually fighting it. Trump was just marrying Eastern Europeans.
Right.
But the Cold War is shaped our views on everything. And one of the views is the world is constantly at the edge of conflict. Military strength is everything. Another view, which I think is wrong. And by the way, I wrote something about this a couple weeks ago in my Substack because I think it's a slightly bigger deal than just casual conversation. But I call it superpower myth. That they were all brought up with the idea that the only way that you could be in control and achieve something is to be a superpower. You have to have nuclear weapons and so forth. Well, what's the track record of the superpowers over the course of the past 50 or 60 years? The United States has lost every single war we've entered, or we haven't achieved our goals, right? Russia went into Afghanistan, lost. Went into Ukraine, lost. We've all learned that having a lot of nuclear weapons, which you can't use, is not that big a deal, is not that big an advantage. And even having a giant army, when you don't have the political will to stay or to conquer a people, is not that big a deal if the people in that country say, we'll wait you out. We will stay as long, the Taliban in Afghanistan or the people in Ukraine or the people in Iran, they're like, we're going to be here. No matter what, right? And so being a superpower isn't what it's cracked up to be. They haven't learned a thing about this. They are still sort of acting out sort of old memes of being in charge.
It's like they're a little bit like teenage boys in that regard, aren't they? That they sort of think that swagger and physical power will defeat a much more determined enemy who they underestimate.
Right. And like teenage boys, I've always thought that testosterone was the world's most powerful brain solvent, because it destroys brain cells. And like a teenage boy, they're just being stupid and they're not paying attention. Because I'll tell you, in the course of the past 60 years, and longer than that, by the way, but let's just take the past 60 years, who hasn't fought a war?
I know what you're going to say.
Okay. The Chinese have not fought a war. They have not spent $1 on this. What China has done, particularly since 1979 in Deng Xiaoping, particularly in the course of the past 20 or 30 years, is they've invested in schools, in AI, in trains, in airports, in infrastructure. And so are they a perfect country? No, they're not. But we're spending $1 trillion a year on military spending that is not gaining us anything. The 37 or $38 billion that the Defense Department says is the cost of this Iran war. Complete lie. It's cost 120, 150 billion.
Well, also we seem to be depleting our stocks of munitions.
Well, that's another issue. But that 38 billion would have paid for all the health care that was cut out of the big, beautiful bill, would have ensured that everybody kept, the supplementals that they needed to keep getting their health care. So what they don't accept is a point that, sorry to be a boring historian, Dwight Eisenhower made in January of 1961 when he made his farewell address, and he talked about the military-industrial complex. And he said, every time you build a bomber, you're not building a school or a hospital. And they don't get it. And so they're hollowing out the country. Now, this issue that you bring up of armaments and how we've depleted our stocks is gigantically important. And, there was this strange exchange over the weekend with Mike Waltz, who's our UN ambassador, saying anybody who says we're depleting our stocks should immediately be prosecuted for leaking information, which is kind of interesting considering Mike Waltz is the guy who sent attack information to Jeff Goldberg of The Atlantic, right?
Right, on his Signal.
On his Signal account.
With also J.D. Vance on there and Pete Hegseth.
Right, but the other thing about it is he then goes on 2 sentences later to say, yeah, we're doing it and we need to fix it. And anybody who opposes fixing it is un-American. So anybody who says that we're doing it is leaking, but 2 sentences later, we are depleting. But if there were a war someplace else, we wouldn't have the stockpiles of munitions we need to fight it. The Chinese know that if they are looking at Taiwan with greedy eyes. Putin knows it. He knows that we don't have the ability to help Ukraine, which we're supposed to help now because apparently Trump's, work wife, Laura Loomer, thinks.
Well, Laura Loomer's done a documentary on Ukraine. She's interviewed.
She's now pro-Ukraine.
Vladimir Zelensky.
Right.
She's now said it's a just war.
Yeah.
And so Donald Trump appears to have changed his mind.
Our shadow Secretary of Defense, Laura Loomer,
Right.
is trying to change our policy. But guess what? We don't have the munitions to send to them because we're expending them all on this insane war where we lose ground every single day.
But Zelensky is gaining ground on Putin, correct?
Right. But part of the reason Zelensky is gaining ground is the Ukrainians said, well, we can't rely on these people. So we're going to build the world's best drone industry.
Right.
And here is Ukraine, not thought of as like a cutting edge country. And they are at the cutting edge of modern warfare with drones that fly through the air, drones that go through the sea, blowing up the Russian fleet in the Black Sea with seagoing drones and so forth. And
blowing up their equivalent of Amazon warehouses and gas stations near Moscow.
And that goes to your point about Putin, which is they're tweaking him. They know that the one thing the Russian people have been sort of isolated from are the consequences of this war. And they are now reaching 1,000 miles into Russia. Putin canceled a parade, right? The Navy Day parade. He canceled it. Why? Because he's afraid that there's going to be a Ukrainian drone attack. People are waiting in gas lines because every major refining facility in Russia has been attacked by these drones. So all of a sudden, Putin is being squeezed politically. And interestingly, that's the exact same game the Iranians are playing with Trump, because they know that if they block the Strait of Hormuz, the price of oil goes up, the price of gasoline goes up, the price of food goes up, that Trump's got an election in 99 days. They know that the longer this goes on, the greater their leverage is. And they know that they're not leaving. So they're kind of mirror image wars that are bringing down these fossil Cold Warriors who don't have the intellectual dexterity to change their positions and adapt to new circumstances. And on top of that, if you're thinking, maybe Trump's over and maybe Putin's over, I can add to the trifecta because tomorrow Bibi Netanyahu is coming to the United States, a war criminal, a a man who's got not a strategic sense in his life. All he knows is that he attacks, Palestinians, he attacks Lebanese, he attacks the Iranians. This has been his whole thing, is that he should be in power because he's a wartime president, because his brain is back in an Israel that was fighting these just wars because it was being threatened by all of its neighbors. But Israel's the bully in the neighborhood now.
And also facing an election in October.
Right. And, it'll be very interesting because I don't know that, if he loses, and he could still win because he's a very deft politician and, in their parliamentary system, the question is whether he can keep his coalition together. And his party is still strong, even if he is not. But if there is an election and it shifts, it doesn't look like any of his opponents will actually change the behavior of Israel that much. And this could drive further the wedge between the United States and Israel. And so, I think U.S.-Israel policy is going to change dramatically in no matter what happens because of this. But, there's also the possibility that Netanyahu loses. And he's all of a sudden, what's going to happen? He's going to face prosecution for the bribery charges and other things that are against him. That's what Trump is looking down the pipe at. Lord knows Putin could be if he lost power. I think with Putin, the question is just how long does he stay alive?
What is the system to get rid of Putin in Russia?
There is no system because, there are no real elections in that country. The last time there was a major change, it was a coup that brought about the major change. Mm-hmm. And, that could happen. But I think just as possible is Putin's an old guy and he could just conk out, just like Trump could conk out. The good news is someday soon there will be no Trump, no Putin, no Netanyahu. The bad news is it's not today. So we have to wait until it happens.
And according to Kurt Andersen, it's not until 2035.
Yeah, he may have thought he was being very optimistic. That's a very bleak picture.
So we also have the Saudi nuclear deal.
Do we?
Well, do we? Yeah, no, I thought that you might have some information on this because I know you talk to a lot of people involved in this area. I mean, Trump got them to sign it last week, and then after they'd signed it, he said, whoa, wait a minute, it's only valid if you sign the Abraham Accords reestablishing relations with Israel. So what's happening?
Well, first of all, Trump's energy secretary, put out this thing.
Chris Wright.
Yeah, and said, go ahead, sign this. And the Saudis were like, okay, because Biden was negotiating a nuclear deal like this with the Saudis on October 6th before the October 7th attacks that occurred, right up until the very last minute. And the key, the whole thing on which it turned was that they would normalize relations with Israel. And if they normalized relations with Israel, then the U.S. could do the kind of nuclear deal with the Saudis that we have, by the way, with the Emiratis, which is, that will help them build some plants. And the Emirati deal, I think, doesn't allow enrichment. The Saudi deal, it was unclear what that was. But again, there are no experts around the president. And the people who are doing these top jobs don't know what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. So the president said, well, this war is going on and we've got to keep all these guys on side. So let's give them something. And surely Jared, who's got all these deals with the Saudis, is saying, hey, let's do something. And maybe Don Jr. and Eric, who all of a sudden are in the nuclear enrichment business, said, hey, let's do something. And by the way, Truth Social, remember Truth Social, the media company? Mm-hmm. Remember when a few months ago they said, all of a sudden we're going into the nuclear business?
Right, and everybody was like, what are you talking about?
What are you doing it? And apparently Westinghouse, which is the big U.S. company that does these things, does a deal with another company, which is controlled by Lutnick's kids, Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick's kids. So there are a bunch of people around Trump saying, it's a good idea, boss. Let's do a nuclear deal with the Saudis. And so Trump undoubtedly said to Wright, hey, go do a deal. And so he goes, writes a deal out, has no conditions in it.
So wait a minute, let's just remind people. So the deal is for American companies, largely Westinghouse, to go into Saudi Arabia and help them build nuclear power stations.
Right. and unclear whether they could then develop an enrichment capacity. And remember, the Saudis, Mohammed bin Salman particularly, have said, if Iran gets a nuke, we're getting a nuke.
Right.
So it's a strange time to choose to do such a deal, right?
Right.
Where you're negotiating with the Iranians and saying, oh, by the way, we're going to help the Saudis with nukes. Do you think that's a disincentive for the Iranians?
Well, wait a minute. We're bombing Iran to get rid of their nuclear abilities, right?
Theoretically,
and then we're
except we know we're not. The intelligence
they were obliterated, David.
Yes, they were obliterated. You're so right. They said we were obliterated, and then we bombed them again, and we said and then Trump said it's all dust and blah, 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 blah. Except they still have the centrifuges that they need. They have the ability to get more centrifuges. The enriched uranium is still there. The scientists who know how to produce this stuff are still there. And according to reports over the weekend, the new Ayatollah who's in charge, the son of the former one.
The gay one, as Donald Trump referred to him on Friday.
I'm not referring to him that way because I don't know, but that he apparently is more inclined to have a nuclear weapon. Well, do you think if the Saudis are doing a nuclear deal with the U.S., they will be more inclined or less inclined? It doesn't strike me as very strategic to do it now. But the Saudis are getting pissed off that, oil is being cut off not just through the Persian Gulf, but through the Red Sea, because now the Houthis on behalf of the Iranians are getting. And so what are the Saudis doing?
So is anybody going to be able to get any oil at all?
Yes, they are, because
how do they get the oil? They've got pipelines, right?
Right. I mean, first of all, some oil can get in and out of the Persian Gulf. The Saudis have pipelines that go across the Arabian Peninsula and dump out into the Red Sea so that they can go and ship it out that way. Now, the Houthis have attacked a little bit, so that's slowing that down. The Emiratis are building a pipeline that allows them to go into the Gulf of Oman. So everybody's trying to find a workaround. The question is, how quick is that going to happen? What is the cost to these economies? And the Saudis are like, well, wait, the Houthis are doing this here. This is, we are not happy with how this is going. And so all of a sudden at that point, Trump says, well, let's do this nuclear deal again. And then he does the nuclear deal. And all of a sudden, there are all these specialists who used to do the nuclear deals, who wrote a bunch of articles. And what do the specialists say? What about the normalization with Israel? What about recognizing Israel? What about signing on to the Abraham Accords? That was the whole reason we were doing it the last time. And all of a sudden Trump goes, oh yeah, and you have to do that.
But he says that after they've already signed. So is this a deal that's actually real or not?
We don't know.
We do not know.
We do not know. And Trump's, emissaries out there, including Mike Waltz, the UN ambassador, over the weekend have said, well, what the president says, that's the deal, and they're going to have to live with that. That's what they have to do to implement the deal. Well, the Saudis are pissed off that they've had this bait and switch on a deal. And it's made more complicated by the fact that the Israelis are doing all sorts of horrible stuff in the West Bank, still fighting a war in Lebanon, and not letting humanitarian aid into Gaza. They can't normalize with Israel right now unless Israel changes their behavior. So, it's a sort of political impossibility in the context of Saudi.
So it's utterly meaningless at this point.
Well, I mean, it means something. It means Trump's trying to cut a deal that's going to help his sons and other people's sons do more corrupt business with the Saudis. Typically, the way Trump will do a deal like this is the Saudis will go, well, we're not going to sign on to that. And then Trump will say, well, what if we signed an MOU that said we're going to begin a process?
Okay, so
you could, and then they come up with some little way to fudge that. And then they say, okay, so we'll have a nuclear deal, but you got to work on doing the thing with the Israelis. And the Saudis will say, well, we're not signing something until the Israelis change their behavior. And Trump says, well, we're talking to the Israelis about changing their behavior. And you end up with some kind of bullshit there where they're not committed to something. Now, the interesting,
but American companies still go in and start building power stations.
Well, and this is an important part when you're dealing with the Trump administration, the stock prices of those companies go up.
Right.
Because people start saying,
Right,
oh, yeah, they're going to profit, so we're going to go and track the stock prices up. Now, another component of this is, are they going to enrich? Now, most people listening, they don't really care about this. But, if the Saudis gain the ability to enrich, which Trump has been on both sides of this, well, we could talk to them about it. No, they're not going to. That's going to freak out the Iranians. I would also add the deal that I think has existed for many years with the United Arab Emirates doesn't allow enrichment, but does say that our deal will be the same as any other deal. So if the Saudis get the ability, then it extends elsewhere there. So, there are a lot of components here. And the problem is, and this really gets to the problem the whole country is, there's no expert advisory process. There's no NSC. There's no people saying, Mr. President, do this, do that. And the president doesn't listen when they do say it. So he's just this impulse engine who goes, hey, we should have a deal with the Saudis. Go cut a deal with the Saudis. Hey, let me send a Truth Social. Hey, let me do this other thing. Oh, I'm going to go and invite the sports team over here. And, let's give me my plane. I got to go fly my new plane everywhere. And they're like, well, Mr. President, the security provisions for the plane are not in place. He says, I don't care. I'm going to do it. And then he has to change it. And so, deal after deal that we strike, including this Iran deal. Remember the MOU?
Yep.
Remember there was a ceasefire?
Of course. Yep.
All the elements of the ceasefire were bad. So all of a sudden it's out the window because, but Trump was just trying to bullshit his way out of this thing. And I think that's, for Trump, this is the big thing. Throughout his whole entire life, since he was a kid, whenever he cracked up the family car or whatever, he's always been able to bullshit his way out of everything. And, he does this and he does a bankruptcy. And then he says, but look over here, Trump Steaks, Trump University. Oh, I'm married to this glamorous woman. I'm at Studio 54. I'm going to do this. Oh, I'm going to do casinos. Nobody's ever lost money in casinos. And he's always he just stays one pile of bullshit ahead of whatever the current problem is, right? He can't do it anymore.
Well, and he keeps saying he's won, it's won, we've obliterated them, we've ended their military facilities.
But he's run out of effective bullshit strategy.
And it's as if the rest of the world is holding up a mirror to him.
They
it's
know.
Not happening.
They know.
Right.
They just know he's full of crap.
Right.
And that it just isn't working. And all his old thing, it's like when he would go on a date and he'd say, well, I have a big apartment. Want to come see my apartment? And somebody would say, oh, well, sure, I'll go see your apartment. And then he's like, yeah, I'll respect you in the morning. And they're like, oh, okay, great. You'll respect me in the morning. Now it's like, no, you're an old man. You're disgusting. You smell funny. I wouldn't go anywhere with you. There is no line in the world that'll work. And the same is true with all of these other things. All of his old lines aren't working anymore.
Which is what I thought you saw in full flare on Friday night at the White House Correspondents, coming back full circle. Old lines, old jokes, like an old Catskill comedian desperately trying to keep the audience away.
And in some way, in a bigger way, Trump, Putin, Netanyahu, they're reading off an old script. It doesn't work anymore. It's actually causing far more damage than benefits. And they are like, Laurence Olivier and the Entertainer, the old
John
vaudevillian.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's exactly what it feels like.
Right. They're over the hill and they want to be on stage and it's tragic. It's Willie Loman too, in Death of a Salesman. It's tragic. These guys, it's also, by the way, Oedipus and Colonus, and it's the Winter's Tale. It's like, we write stories all the time.
Right, it's King Lear.
About old leaders who pass their prime, jump the shark, and can't. Notice how we got from King Lear to jump the shark. That's, but they don't have another move. Trump doesn't have another move.
He doesn't have another move. All right, so other people that may not have another move, the Tate brothers. The Tate brothers, who were helped out of Romania, where they were wanted on sex trafficking and rape charges, managed to get back to Florida. They are, as you know, They were arrested last week, wanted on rape charges, sex trafficking
Multiple,
charges,
like dozens and
child
dozens.
pornography charges in the UK.
Right.
And now the White House has said that they're not going to help them. But interestingly, they appeared to be being hosted, at least, by Paolo Zampoli.
Paolo Zampoli, who is involved in the Epstein thing, friend of Epstein, a guy who was married to a Brazilian model and then was involved with her and then he didn't like her anymore. So he calls up and he says, get her thrown out of the country. And she then says, okay, I'm going to tell you everything about Melania and Epstein. And it was a big hubbub, right?
And he's the man that's supposed to have introduced Donald Trump to Melania Trump at one of his parties, or Melania Naus, as she was then.
Right. And, I think what it gets to, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is, it's this idea that this Epstein scandal knows no bounds. Everything is connected to it because it's not just about Epstein. It's about the way a certain type of rich, empowered person with a sense of impunity acts. And they have for a long time thought they could do whatever they wanted. And remember, the Tate brothers, who are among the most vile and disgusting people who ever lived, said, oh, yeah, we're close to the Trumps. Mm-hmm. And, when they came over here and they got into the country and some strings were pulled for them, apparently Barron Trump, who was about, handling outreach to young men of the Trump campaign, said he was going to work with the Tate brothers. And then the Tate brothers show up at the UFC matches and Trump goes to the UFC matches. And, Nate Bargatze goes to the UFC. Everybody connects to these things. And I think that's why the Epstein scandal connects to the Epstein class, connects to corruption, connects to oligarchs, connects to Elon, connects to the big beautiful bill, connects to why people do not have the health care that they wanted, connects to why billionaires are getting huge tax breaks and other people are losing services and paying more and losing their jobs. And so you might say, well, that's the Tate brothers and it's disgusting and it's a little weird that Barron's involved and it ties into Epstein and that's disgusting. And think, well, that's not central to the lives of people. But it is, because it's all about rich people with a sense of impunity who feel they control the country, control the society, control the Supreme Court, control the Congress, control the White House, have one of their guys in the White House who's saying, I can do whatever I want. You can grab a woman here. I can commit fraud. I can get, a free pass for no audits from the IRS. I can make it happen. Trump is the wet dream of all of these people who think that their billions of dollars buy them the right to do whatever they want, and laws and limitations are for little people. And so, we joked about the Tates, and you were saying it's ruined capri pants for everybody, and all this stuff when they got rounded up. And I think this week they're starting to figure out what the trial process is going to look like in the UK. It's another problem for Trump, by the way, quite apart from all this big picture stuff. From now through 99 days, the Tate story is going to be in the headlines, and the Epstein story is going to stay in the headlines. I mean, there was an interesting story. I'd be interested in what you thought about it in the New York Times this weekend about Epstein's girlfriend. Mm-hmm. And she stands to inherit $100 million. And
a 33-carat ring.
And a 33-carat. And she's a dentist, apparently. So, because Epstein pulled some strings to get her into Columbia Dentistry School. And then
better that he pulled strings than teeth.
Well, she's pulling the teeth now. But also, by the way, did you see that he got her into the country? He said the fastest way to get into the country is to have a same-sex marriage.
Yes.
So there's this other woman.
Cynical.
There's this other woman who will marry you, and, go pretend you're married for a year and then she'll divorce you. And that's exactly what happened. She pretended to be married. She got her green card. A year later, they get divorced. And, what I thought was kind of weird about this story was it tried to portray her as sympathetic, which suggested to me maybe she was helping them with the story a little bit, trying to say, oh, this poor girl, and, why did... The $100 million of Epstein should be going to Epstein's victims. There should not be a penny to go to somebody who dated him, who hung out with him ever since he was found to be a criminal.
Well, and tricked the American immigration system by marrying someone knowing that she was doing it only to get a green card.
We're joking, but that's a pattern. Because it was one of the things they had to offer to these people. It was like, I got the system wired. Come sleep with me, citizenship. What do you think?
And then you're beholden to me.
Then there's beholden, and there's money, and blah, blah, blah. And it was a whole gross game of paying people off for sex and services and so forth. But the point is, this woman knew who he was. She was the last person he communicated with before he killed himself, right? She knew who he was. She was cashing in on the whole thing. She should not get a penny. Whatever he's got, whatever assets exist there, should not be distributed to, his nephews and nieces and whatever.
And interestingly, the two people that he pressurized to give her a place at Columbia Dentistry School after she was initially turned down have both lost their jobs.
As they should have. As whoever helped Melania get a genius visa should have.
Genius. David, I'm genius.
She's a genius.
Visa.
The one genius thing that Melania has ever done is disappear. How can you, as the First Lady of the United States, go missing?
Go missing.
Maybe she's with Mitch.
Maybe she's with Mitch. Mitch and Melania. That's possible. Who knows?
They're off on, some metaphorical Epstein Island.
I think she's, sitting in Trump Tower. And where is Barron? How do you hide a 6'8" boy?
I don't know how you hide him, but if he's in Trump Tower, aren't there reporters? Well, don't people do this stuff for a living?
Also, when asked, when Paolo Zampoli, just reminding people, the model agent who introduced Melania and Donald Trump and who then has just recently hosted the Tate
Who, by
brothers.
the way, Trump made into some kind of an ambassador.
Yeah, he's an ambassador. Yeah. He's a trade ambassador, I think. When asked if he was doing this as part of his ambassadorial duties, he said, no, it was a summer evening. It was a summer outing.
They were just people hanging out at my house.
Right.
I mean, they were sex traffickers and rapists.
Alleged rapists.
But I hang out.
Couldn't find two more unappealing characters than the Tate brothers.
No.
And of course, they're hanging out with Paolo Zampoli, who had his ex-girlfriend arrested by ICE, and she was for 4 months kept in ICE facilities.
And all of these people, Trump likes.
They're friends of Trump. Great guy, lovely guy, lovely guy.
But this is who he hangs out with. And all I can say, America, is we knew. People who lived in New York knew. You were told over and over again, the sleaziest guy there is, the most corrupt guy there is, the worst businessman, the worst character, hangs out with the worst people. And America said, well, let's give that a try.
Let's have that guy. Not once, but twice.
Right.
Not once,
there are 340 million Americans.
So
let's have that guy.
Final question for you, David. In 15, 20 years, what is the Smithsonian going to say about Donald Trump?
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because, a couple of days ago, Trump issued a statement, an executive order, by the way, talk about things he's abused, that said that outside of the Smithsonian, they have to put up signs saying that the history depicted in the Smithsonian may not actually be accurate, meaning that it may show that we were mean to the slaves. It may show that people who were treated badly actually have grievances and that the white masters of this country may have committed some crimes, right?
And the presidents of this country owned slaves.
Right. Well, all of which, by the way, are facts. And the Smithsonian reports them as facts. And I saw this and I thought, and I actually wrote something on social media about it, but I saw this and I was like, I just can't wait because the days after Trump died, oh my God, they're going to be glorious. The hotels will be sold out across Washington as the name Trump comes off of buildings, as the gold lame comes off of everything, as the decorations come down, as people try to steam clean the entire city, get the bacteria out, get any sense of Trump out, and they're going to try to reverse all of these things. What he's done in the national parks and the Smithsonian and everything. Where he's
Are they going to refill the reflecting pool?
The reflecting pool may have to be, filled up with Fiji water or something to keep it, from being, infected by the pool guy he got to redo the thing.
With a no-bid contract, but then surprise, surprise, it goes horribly wrong.
Right, but the thing that I thought was, think 25 years from now, when the Smithsonian's got an exhibit on Donald Trump, the worst president ever, the moment American democracy broke down, the moment our society and the protections within, we learned the limitations of the Constitution, we learned all of this thing, the golden age of corruption exhibit at the Smithsonian. And Trump will be the center of all of that, and it will drive maybe his kids crazy. He won't be around to see it. But there'll be mugs in the gift shop, of golden age of corruption with Donald Trump's face on it.
Gold mugs.
Gold
mugs.
Gilded mugs.
Gilded mugs.
Yeah. And that'll be, I think one of the great punishments and one of the great twists that will bring true justice to Trump will be history and museums telling it like it is. And he will not, there will be
universities.
There'll be no true social. He's trying to change the narrative every single day. That's why he's writing 50 of these things a day, because he's trying to tell the world, hey, I'm good. I'm doing things. Everything's great. And at a certain point, that gets turned off. He has no voice. Truth returns, and it's going to be real damn uncomfortable.
And democracy hasn't entirely died, David, because we are able to have this conversation. And as you say, we're able to be beast.
Be beast. It has not. And fortunately, the beast is keeping democracy alive single-handedly.
Well, I think the courts are doing their job too. But David, it's so nice to have you in the office. It's so fun to just hear your point of view on everything. And it's so much easier to talk to someone when we're not remote. I think more trips, please. More trips
I'd love to come up to New York. It's great. I love New York. It's a separate country.
It's a separate country. David Rothkopf, thank you very much.
Thank you, Joanna.
If you have been, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe to The Daily Beast. Thrilling to have you in the office.
Thrilling to be here. And let's not forget to thank the people who made this possible. John Romero. Impossible to read what you've written here for
Ryan
me.
Murray.
Ryan Murray.
Rachel.
Is this your handwriting?
It's my handwriting. Yeah.
Folks, if you could only see what I see.
If it was an RX, you'd be able to read it.
Yeah,
you'd scramble to read it.
Rachel Passer, Heather Passaro, and Neil Rosenhaus.
So the good news is we have so many B-Beast tier members now. There are too many names to read out, and we really appreciate your support.